In this episode of Restore It, instead of waiting a month in between updates, I'm going to show you the progress I've made on the E30 since the last episode, whilst I've been getting the new workshop set up at the same time. So this is going to be a shorter one, but I thought you'd prefer that over a long wait. So in this episode I'm going to remove the rear right outer arch, because like the other side, this panel is too far gone for my liking, mainly due to the damage from the quarter panel removal, and also this old repair at the rear that I think I would have redone anyway if the panel was staying. As well as that, there's going to be some welding required on the inner wheel arch that will be more accessible with it gone. And before the new panel does go on, I'm going to come back to this corner that I repaired in one of the first episodes after it got back from Spain and redo it as a much larger single piece repair. So without further ado, let's get this outer wheel arch off and see what lies beneath. I'd say about 80% of the comments on the last episode were you guys suggesting that I should try the spot weld drill bits over the finger sander. I'm sure some of you have seen me using these in the past a few times, both types actually, the ones with the little serrated blades around the edge and the normal but slightly flatter drill bits. I do like these, but I find it a lot harder to not damage the panel behind the one I'm removing. The only problems I sometimes find with these drill bits is getting the clearance with the drill, like in this situation where the spot weld is right next to a right angle, making it very difficult if not impossible to get the drill bit in there. So in these cases, I can't think of a better tool than the finger sander, but I'm always up for being wrong, so if anyone can suggest something better, please do down in the comments. I think the bits with the serrated blade around the edges are much harder to use than the flat bits, which is what I'm using here. I think I just need a bit more practice to feel more confident with them. The only damage I'm doing with this drill bit is a small hole on the other piece which I can plug weld quite easily. Compare that to the other type with the blades, I found myself going completely through the panel behind, which just makes for more work in the long run. But to be fair, I'll give it to you guys, you weren't wrong, this is much quicker. Like on the other side, the underseal was making it difficult for the splitter to do its job, so I removed it with a wire wheel. Much like the other side, it was just a case of breaking each spot weld along the perimeter of the panel without touching the one beneath it. Since the last episode, I've managed to fix the workhorse compressor completely. I ended up replacing the non-return or check valve with a new one, along with new compressor thread sealer, and gave it a brand new pressure switch, which means I can now turn it off and on with the red button like I used to. It will now pump all the way up to 150 psi and hold its pressure whilst doing so. The pressure switch came set to 125 psi and I still need to finish adjusting it so it will go all the way up to that 150. And once that's done, it will be like it was when it was brand new, apart from the slight wear and tear. So with this workhorse now back up to its 13 CFM, I can now use air tools properly again. So when I do have to use the finger sander to grind a spot weld down, it's a lot less painful. Before we get back to the E30, I just have a very quick word from our sponsor, Roman. As we all know, preparation is the key ingredient in the confidence we have that our cars aren't going to let us down when we need them. Whether you've been in a relationship for years or are just getting started, having the confidence that comes from preparation means you're free to enjoy the moment when the moment comes. Even though you may feel far from ordinary, the truth is that erectile dysfunction is a very common thing. The statistics say that 52% of men aged 40 to 70 experience some form of erectile dysfunction at some point. With Roman, you can get a free online evaluation and ongoing care for ED, all from the comfort and privacy of your own home. Roman's system is completely confidential and discreet, and getting started is super easy. Just go to ro.co/restore it and complete an online visit. And if medication is appropriate, a US licensed healthcare professional will work with you to find the best treatment plan, which ships to you with free 2-day shipping. So make sure you're ready and have the confidence and control this spring with Roman. Just click the link at the top of the description or go to ro.co/restore it today, and if prescribed, get 20% off your first month of ED treatment. Thanks to Roman for supporting the channel, let's get back to it. As you can see, I'm using the finger sander quite a bit, even though it's a lot slower than the drill bit. I just can't get in there straight on enough to not damage the panel behind it. Maybe they do extra long spot weld drill bits. I bet that's the thing. I'm going to edit most of this out, as it still takes quite a while to do in real time, and even when it's sped up. and there it goes. It was at this point that I realised just how little damage had been done by the drill bit. In some cases there was a small indent, and in others no damage at all, leaving a little bit of the spot weld behind. I can now see some questionable areas that will definitely need looking at more closely. Firstly, I'm going to remove any leftover spot welds and clean the surface. With that done, I can see exactly where I need to plug weld those holes. Whilst I was doing that, I discovered that this bracket, which I forget its purpose, has caused quite a bit of trouble just being there. Taking a quick look at the outer wheel arch, I think it's definitely the right choice to replace it. Leaving it on would make the repairs I'm about to do a lot harder. Because I could see at least 3 areas of concern, I was keen to get all of this underseal out of the way so I could take a proper look at all of the damage. Whilst I was doing that, I stumbled upon these questionable welds, and I couldn't work out if they were from BMW's factory or the work of someone else. It looks like it's all a part of the bigger panel, which is definitely factory, but I'm not sure. Maybe the inner seal has already been done in the past? What do you guys think? Does this look factory to you? And if so, would you redo it? At this point, I could already see more bad spots than I was expecting. And for those of you who are wondering, yes, I am going to redo this large lap weld that was done in Spain by a garage. They weren't aware of the level I was going for, and it was my fault for taking it to them in the first place, so absolutely no blame on them there. Getting back to the removal of the underseal, this went on for some time, but once it was done, I could really see the extent of the rust damage. As for this old repair, I will of course be completely redoing it, but overall there's quite a bit more to do in this rear right wheel arch alone than I was expecting. This seemingly harmless little bracket has caused 2 massive holes where it was attached to the chassis, but somehow it's still well attached enough to put up a fight. With that out of the way, I used a small wire wheel and the finger sander to remove any leftover underseal, rust or paint, making it even easier to see the work required, and at the same time preparing the surface for bodywork primer. With that done, I can wipe it with silicone remover and protect it. Like I said at the start of the ep, this is going to be super slow progress until the new shop is complete. With the small amount of time I get with the car at the moment, it's tempting to just cut all of this rust out and get it all welded up as quickly as possible and make a great super packed half-hour long episode. But I'd rather spend the time on one repair, do it as well as I can, and be patient for when I can spend whole days at a time on this project. So in this episode, I'm going to focus on this tricky repair. It's tricky for me because there isn't a straight section on it. There's also rust along an edge and on a section that's been created in a press. Because this piece baffles my mind, I'm going to go back to my old way of cutting it out first and then making the new piece using the old one as a guide. It's hard to see in these shots, but this line is well clear of any pitting. The pitting just reaches the bottom lip of this edge, leaving the top section as good metal. I want to see if I can remove just the piece I want, leaving as much original metal behind as possible. So with that marked, I got to cutting, making sure not to cut through to the panel behind. And there it goes. Thankfully the panel behind survived, but not so thankfully, it's totally rusty. This is why I'm leaning more towards having the chassis dipped once most or all of the welding is done. Peace of mind that all of the rust in these types of places is gone. I'll just have to make sure I find a good dipping place that knows what it's doing to make sure the paint doesn't go wrong a year later due to trapped acid or something similar. Now that I have the piece on the workbench, I can cut and start forming a piece of 1mm sheet metal to match. If you remember that beige E30 that I used as a donor, I'm also using it for small bits like this. It saves cutting into a whole sheet, and in a way, it's nice to know that the same quote-unquote BMW metal is going back into the chassis. After not too long, this is the piece I had. To include the circle part of the punched section was far too much for my brain to handle, so instead I'm going to weld it together once the rest of the piece is finished. The first thing I needed to do was attach the top lip to the main piece. For this, I held it in place with magnets, tacked it, and then welded it completely on both sides. With that done, I could then flatten those welds and shape the corner to match the old one. I could now remove the old underseal and tidy up the welds on the inner side. I used a cutting blade to clean up the inner welds, as that was the only thing I could get in there due to the weird shape of the piece. I could then weld in the half circle to finish the piece off. Before I could install it, I had to remove the rust on the other panel. Now that I'm pretty sure I'm going to have the chassis dipped, it's less important to protect every single area that isn't exposed to air with bodywork primer, because it's all going to be stripped away with acid anyway, and then e-coated, which will get into all of those super hard to reach places and protect them with the power of electricity. After a few tacks and a bit of tweaking with the hammer, the new piece was in place and ready to be fully welded. I used a tiny flathead to pinch the two surfaces together, making them as flush as possible before tacking them into place. I was running low on gas for a few of these welds, which is why they look weird, but I soon realised that was the problem and turned it up. I was also having a bit of trouble on this section, which I think was due to the way I made the cut. I didn't leave it super clean. But there we go, fully welded in and not looking too bad. Now I just need to dress the welds and protect the bare metal. After I ground it down, there were a few rough edges that I had to fill in, but that didn't take too long. And once done, I think it was definitely worth it. I will now need to find or make the bracket that caused all of this trouble, but at least this time it will be properly protected from the bare metal up and last 10 times longer than the factory version. I'm quite happy with this job, and the more I do, the more I realise how repairing a car like this is more about fabricating than it is welding. But I'm really starting to enjoy that process as well, now that I'm not a complete noob. So as always, I can now clean and protect the bare metal for the time being. And that's all I had time for this week, but stay tuned for the first episode of the new workshop build series coming soon, and also more E30 chassis work, as that's all I can do right now, which will soon feature a lot of brand new panels being spot welded onto the chassis. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye for now.